Welcome, fellow tarot travelers, tripping through the tetrahedronal triptych of the cards I shall lay before you in a tesseract. Today we have a very important topic. It turns out that Russia is at it again. Now, I'm not opposed to Russia, and I'm not pro-Russia, but there certainly is a lot going on today with Russia toying with the Ukraine. NBC News noticed that the Ukraine convened an emergency meeting of what it called its war cabinet after it accused Russia of having fired on 3 of its vessels in the Black Sea, injuring at least 6 sailors. Russia's Federal Security Service, or FSB, confirmed that it had seized what it called 3 Ukrainian warships, saying they had trespassed into Russian territorial waters. Well, this is a big conflict that could occur, that could erupt over this, even a world war. Well, during the UN Security Council meeting, the Ukraine representative made it clear that Russia illegally occupies annexed Crimea, and so the maritime boundaries are legally under Ukrainian domain, not Russian. Russia claims that a referendum vote last year legitimizes Russian ownership of the region and that Russian territorial claims are legitimate. Well, this would be like if the city of San Diego, California, voted to leave America and join Mexico. And the very next day, Mexican tanks crossed the border and took over the city of San Diego and put up barbed wired fences around the city and demanded visas and passports to enter into San Diego. Can a referendum really do that suddenly and in that type of method? Ukraine then calls for martial law for 30 days on 10 regions of the country to be prepared in case of a Russian land invasion. And all of this happened in November 26, 2018. But on December 5th, there are rumors that NATO sent ships to the Crimean coast. And on December 8th, that NATO and American military dispatches were sent to the Donbas region. Russia has recently invaded, under Putin, South Ossetia in Georgia, Crimea, and the Donbas region of the Ukraine, as well as, through the building of bases, created a somewhat permanent presence in Syria. Is Russia about to invade Eastern Europe? Will Russia send tanks to the Baltic states? Will NATO under Trump respond if they do? Well, these are very large questions for which there's no answer. And so we turn to the tarot cards because they answer questions that cannot possibly be answered any other way. And today we're using a deck called Born in the USSR by Alexander Danilov. And I was lucky enough to acquire a deck that is number 199 of 500 decks total that this famous artist had made. And he's located in Italy. So if you seek to buy this deck, you will have to pay for shipping, which is quite expensive, and a long time of delay till it arrives. But it's well worth it because it is a very, very unique deck. And what the artist, Mr. Danilov, did is he took old Soviet propaganda pictures and created only the higher arcana deck of the tarot. And because of its pictographic nature, it seems well suited for Russian topics. I call it one of my commie decks because it's definitely communistic. And I'm not a communist, but I do need to look at the political spectrum of events that happen in communist countries, and I need to have tarot cards that reflect those regions if I'm going to get the right answer. So today we'd like to know, is Russian expansionism creating a problem? And is it going to continue? So let's see what the cards tell us. We have the Wheel of Fortune. we have temperance, and we have the world. Well, let's look at these one at a time. The Wheel of Fortune, and this is very well done from a propaganda poster where you see on top of the wheel the Soviet Union soldier and the Russian bear with the prisoner going off to the gulag falling down the side in an industrialized wheel, because it's part of the industrialization of the communist revolution where they turned peasantry into factory workers. And this card is all about fate and destiny, rising to the top, falling to the bottom. In time, we play all roles. But to see the Wheel of Fortune here in the past of Russia speaks about how it once was a great empire. Well, some would argue that it wasn't that great if you lived there. And now it's just a singular country, no longer owning the entirety of Eastern Europe. So that was how it fell from the wheel of fate. In the current arena, we see that the temperance card is present, which means Russia is right now playing a holding game. It means that they made small gains in Ossetia and Crimea, and they might have a skirmish or two with the Ukraine, but Russia is not seeking direct confrontation. And although it may have plans for expansionism, currently it is not seeking to take over Eastern Europe. But if we look at the future, there's one thing that Russia really wants, and that's the world. And that is why we have the world card here. So it seems to me that one of the problems we're having, not just with Russia, but with Turkey and other countries that once had an empire, and their empire collapsed, and now they have earned money and resources through petrodollars and other things, and have resentments because there are all kinds of restraints on their economy put forth by the West in the case of Russia, that these countries want to reassume the position of empire. Turkey looks to the instability of Syria to reassess its empire standing, and Russia is looking at America as a weakened country currently, and with new ties with America through Trump's outreach to Russia, possibly the groundwork for expansionism could occur. And what we ought to all be aware of is that its temperate view of the present is not the goal at hand. Indeed, world dominance, not just the return of an empire, seems to be what Russia wants. Now let's place another card to see the nature of the conquest of the world. And we have the High Priestess below, and we have the Chariot above. Let's have a look at these cards. Above explains the position of the highest aspiration. And as you see Stalin above his tank in a conquesting mode, this is kind of like the Chariot card for these cards is like the tanks rolling on Hungary. It speaks of conquest, and it speaks of immediate, fast domination, rushing to Germany, rushing over Poland, rushing to take over the West. But below shows the High Priestess. And as you can see, we have the image here of a propagandist. And so I think what's going to happen is that Russia's going to continue with its propaganda campaign, manipulating elections, and destabilizing governments with long-range plans using social media, using RT and using other tools at its disposal for causing civilian populations to rise up against each other and cause basic dissatisfaction with government. But let's not be fooled. There may come a time when indeed the tanks do roll out again. And I think we should have a look at this card one more time before we ever question the idea that Russia may be a peaceful country under the current rulership of ex-KGB agent Vladimir Putin.